The convent sits on a quiet hillside outside Sidon, southern Lebanon. It's 1987. The Civil War has turned this country into a patchwork of militias, checkpoints, and invisible borders. The morning sun cuts through the olive trees as a small car approaches a Hezbollah checkpoint on the coastal road. Inside the car, a woman in a black and white habit sits in the passenger seat. Her hands rest calmly in her lap. Her face shows no emotion. She is Sister Marie Claire, a French Catholic nun who has lived in Lebanon for 8 years, running a small charity clinic in the mountains. The militiaman at the checkpoint waves the car to a stop. As young, maybe 22, with an AK-47 slung over his shoulder and a radio clipped to his chest. He leans down to look inside. The driver, an elderly Lebanese man, hands over his papers without a word. The militiaman barely glances at them. His eyes move to the nun. He asks her name. She answers in French accented Arabic, soft and steady. He asks where she's going. She says she's returning from a supply run in Tyre. He nods and waves them through. But as the car pulls away, the militiaman's hand moves to his radio. He speaks quickly. Within 30 seconds, 2 more men step into the road 50 meters ahead. This time, they don't wave. They raise their rifles and shout for the car to stop. The driver hits the brakes. Sister Marie Claire doesn't move. Her breathing stays even. She knows what's happening. Someone has flagged her. Someone has been watching. And now, she has less than 60 seconds to sell the cover story that took Mossad 3 years to build. Because Sister Marie Claire is not a nun. She's not French, and she's not here to run a charity. She's an undercover Mossad operative, and the clinic in the mountains is a front for one of the most dangerous intelligence-gathering operations ever run inside Hezbollah-controlled territory. If her cover breaks here, she will disappear. No trial, no negotiation. Just a shallow grave in the Bekaa Valley. How did an Israeli agent end up trapped at this checkpoint, betting her life on one impossible trick? To understand how this operation came to exist, you have to go back to 1982. That year, Israel invaded southern Lebanon to push back the Palestine Liberation Organization and stop rocket attacks on northern Israeli towns. The invasion succeeded in scattering the PLO, but it also created a vacuum, and into that vacuum came a new enemy, Hezbollah, Party of God, backed by Iran and Syria, trained by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, and built around a core of Shiite fighters who had no interest in negotiation or ceasefire. They wanted Israel destroyed. And unlike the PLO, which had been a secular nationalist movement, Hezbollah was religious, disciplined, and patient. By 1985, Hezbollah controlled large parts of southern Lebanon. They ran their own courts, their own hospitals, their own military infrastructure. They kidnapped Western hostages to leverage diplomacy. They used car bombs and ambushes to bleed Israeli forces. And most dangerous of all, they were learning. They were studying Israeli tactics. They were building tunnels, rotating fighters, encrypting communications. Israel's military could push them back temporarily, but they couldn't break them. And that meant Israel needed intelligence. Deep, persistent, long-term human intelligence. They needed someone on the inside. But getting an agent into Hezbollah territory wasn't like infiltrating a government ministry or a business. Southern Lebanon in the mid-1980s was a surveillance state run by paranoid militias. Everyone watched everyone. Strangers were questioned. Outsiders were suspect. And Israeli operatives, no matter how good their Arabic or their cover story, stood out. Mossad needed a cover identity so perfect, so untouchable, that even the most suspicious Hezbollah commander would never think to challenge it. They needed someone who could move freely, talk to people, gather intelligence, and never be searched. Never be doubted, never be feared. And that's when someone in Mossad's planning division proposed the idea that seemed so insane it might actually work. What if the agent was a businessman, or a journalist, or a medical worker? What if the agent was a nun? The plan required precision at every level. You can't just send someone into Lebanon dressed as a nun and hope it works. The identity had to be real, verifiable, bulletproof. So Mossad built it from the ground up. They started with the simplest question. Where would this nun come from? They chose France. France had a long history of Catholic missions in Lebanon, dating back to the 19th century. French nuns were common in the region. They ran schools, orphanages, hospitals. They were respected, trusted, and most importantly, they were protected by a kind of unwritten rule. Even in the chaos of the Civil War, even among the most extreme factions, nuns were off limits. Killing or detaining a Catholic nun would create international backlash, diplomatic complications, and internal dissent among Lebanon's Christian population, which every militia wanted to keep neutral or cooperative. Mossad created a complete backstory. Sister Marie Claire Leclerc, born in Lyon, France in 1950, joined the Sisters of Charity in 1972, sent to Lebanon in 1979 to work at a small mission clinic in the mountains outside Sidon. The clinic was real. Mossad arranged for it to be funded through a legitimate Catholic charity based in Paris. They hired local Lebanese staff who had no idea they were working for Israeli intelligence. They stocked it with medicine, ran free consultations, treated gunshot wounds and childhood diseases without asking questions. The clinic became part of the community. People trusted it, and Sister Marie Claire became a familiar face. But the woman playing Sister Marie Claire wasn't French. She was Israeli, a Mossad officer who had been recruited specifically for this mission. She spoke fluent French and Arabic. She had studied Catholic theology and ritual until she could recite prayers, explain sacraments, and move through a mass without hesitation. She had lived in Paris for 2 years before the mission, attending services, meeting nuns, learning their mannerisms, their rhythms, their way of moving through the world. She learned how to be invisible, how to deflect questions with humility, how to make people feel guilty for doubting her. And then she went to Lebanon. She didn't parachute in. She didn't sneak across the border. She arrived openly on a commercial flight from Paris to Beirut, carrying a French passport and a letter of introduction from her order. She passed through customs. She was driven to the clinic, and she began her work. For the first 6 months, she did nothing but her cover. She treated patients. She prayed. She lived the life of a nun, because the only way the cover would hold was if it became real. If the community saw her as one of them. If even the most paranoid watcher found nothing to suspect. After the first year, Sister Marie Claire began her real work. But she didn't recruit informants. She didn't ask questions. She didn't do anything that looked like espionage. Instead, she listened. In a place like southern Lebanon, information flows through social networks. People talk, they gossip, they complain, and they trust nuns. Mothers brought their children to the clinic and talked about their husbands. Hezbollah fighters came in with shrapnel wounds and mentioned where they'd been hit. Village leaders asked Sister Marie Claire to mediate disputes and, in the process, revealed who controlled which roads, which families were loyal to which faction, which commanders were rising and which were falling out of favor. She kept no notes. She never wrote anything down. Instead, she memorized everything. Names, faces, routes, schedules. She had been trained in a memory technique called the method of loci, which allows operatives to store vast amounts of information by associating it with mental images and spatial locations. Every few weeks, she would leave the clinic on a supply run to Tyre or Beirut, and during those trips, she would meet her Mossad handler. The meetings were brief: a cafe, a church, a bookstore. She would sit, order coffee, and recite everything she had learned. The handler would listen, ask clarifying questions, and give her new objectives. Then she would return to the clinic, and the cycle would continue. But by 1987, the operation was beginning to show cracks. Hezbollah's counterintelligence had improved. They were running background checks on foreign aid workers. They were monitoring phone lines. They were following people. And someone, somewhere, had started asking questions about Sister Marie Claire. Why did she travel so often? Why did she always go alone? Why did she never invite other clergy to visit the clinic? The questions were subtle, indirect, but they were there. And then, in June 1987, a Hezbollah intelligence officer named Hassan Nasrallah, who would later become the group's Secretary General, began reviewing files on all foreign nationals operating in the South. Sister Marie Claire's name appeared on his list. He ordered a quiet investigation. Nothing formal, just observation. A team was assigned to watch her movements, to see if anything didn't fit. And that's when the checkpoint incident happened. When the second group of militiamen stops the car, Sister Marie Claire knows she has one chance. If she panics, she's dead. If she runs, she's dead. If she says the wrong thing, she's dead. So she does the only thing that makes sense. She stays calm, she stays in character, because the character is her only weapon. The militiamen order her out of the car. She steps out slowly, keeping her hands visible. One of them asks for her papers. She hands over her French passport and a letter from her order, both of which are authentic forgeries created by Mossad's document division. He looks at them. He asks why she's traveling alone. She explains in soft, patient Arabic that the clinic is understaffed and she must make supply runs herself. He asks why she doesn't have an escort. She says she trusts in God's protection. He asks if she knows any Hezbollah fighters. She says she treats everyone who comes to the clinic, regardless of faction, because that is her duty as a servant of Christ. He stares at her, and for a moment the entire operation hangs on his decision. But then something shifts. He looks at her habit, at her calm, tired face, at the cross around her neck, and he makes the same calculation that everyone else has made. She's a nun, she's French, she's harmless. Detaining her would cause problems. So he hands back her papers and waves her through. The car drives away. Sister Marie Claire does look back. Her heart is pounding, but her face shows nothing, because she knows the surveillance isn't over. She knows that from this moment forward, Hezbollah will be watching her more closely. And she knows that Mossad has to make a decision. Do they pull her out now, before the net closes? Or do they keep her in place and risk everything? Mossad chose to pull her out. But not immediately, because an immediate extraction would confirm suspicion. Instead, they staged a slow, natural withdrawal. Over the next 3 months, Sister Marie Claire began talking about health problems. She mentioned fatigue. She coughed during prayers. She told patients she might need to return to France for medical treatment. And in September 1987, she left Lebanon on a commercial flight, just as she had arrived. No drama, no chase, just a quiet departure. But the story didn't end there. Because the intelligence she had gathered over those 3 years was devastating. She had identified safe houses, weapons caches, supply routes, and key commanders. She had mapped Hezbollah's internal power structure. And most importantly, she had uncovered the identity of a Lebanese intelligence officer who was secretly working for Hezbollah while pretending to serve the Lebanese government. That officer's name was given to Lebanese authorities by Mossad through a back channel. He was arrested, interrogated, and executed. His network was dismantled. And Hezbollah's ability to operate inside Beirut was crippled for the next 2 years. The operation remains classified. Mossad has never officially confirmed it. But former intelligence officers, speaking anonymously to journalists and historians over the years, have described it as one of the most successful, long-term infiltrations ever conducted in hostile territory. It proved that the right cover, executed with discipline and patience, could penetrate even the most paranoid organizations. And it set a template that other agencies would study and attempt to replicate. But it also raised questions that intelligence communities still wrestle with today, because Sister Marie Claire wasn't just a cover. She was a real person to the people she treated. Mothers trusted her with their children. Wounded fighters let her see them at their most vulnerable. Village elders asked her for advice, and all of it was a lie. Every prayer, every act of kindness, every moment of trust. All of it was in service of a mission those people would have seen as betrayal. And that raises the deeper question. Is it morally acceptable to weaponize trust, to use religion, charity, and compassion as tools of espionage? Mossad would argue that in a conflict where the enemy uses human shields, hides weapons in schools, and builds tunnels under hospitals, every tool is justified. That the intelligence gathered saved lives, that it prevented attacks, that it gave Israel the ability to defend itself without launching full-scale wars that would have killed thousands. And those arguments have weight, but the people who were deceived didn't see it that way. When the truth eventually leaked years later, through investigative journalism and defector testimony, the reaction in southern Lebanon was rage. Not just at Israel, but at the idea that even a nun could be a spy. It deepened the sense that no one could be trusted, that every act of kindness might be a mask, and that paranoia, in turn, made it harder for legitimate aid workers, real nuns, real doctors, to operate in the region, because once trust is weaponized, it becomes a casualty of war. There's also the question of risk to civilians. Sister Marie Claire's cover put the clinic's staff at risk. If her identity had been exposed while she was still in Lebanon, Hezbollah would have retaliated. The clinic would have been raided. The staff would have been interrogated. Some of them might have been killed, simply for working in the same building as an Israeli spy, even though they had no knowledge of the operation. Mossad knew that risk, they accepted it, and they counted on the fact that Sister Marie Claire's discipline would prevent exposure. But that's a gamble. And the people whose lives were gambled never consented. So where does that leave us? If you were running an intelligence agency in a state under constant threat, would you authorize an operation like this? If you knew that the intelligence could save dozens of lives but might cost the lives of innocent people who had no idea they were part of the game, would you make that call? And if you were one of the mothers who brought your child to that clinic, who trusted that nun, who believed she was there to help, how would you feel when you learned the truth? These aren't abstract questions. They're the questions that define covert warfare. And they don't have clean answers. Intelligence services operate in a world where every decision exists in shades of gray, where protecting your own citizens sometimes means deceiving others, where the line between legitimate security operations and violations of trust becomes impossible to draw clearly. Consider the calculation from Mossad's perspective. The intelligence gathered through this operation likely prevented multiple attacks. It exposed weapons smuggling networks. It identified command structures that, once disrupted, saved Israeli soldiers' lives and potentially prevented rocket attacks on civilian areas. The strategic value was immense. And in the cold mathematics of intelligence work, that value has to be weighed against the risks, against the moral cost, against the precedent it sets. But then consider it from another angle. The Lebanese families who came to that clinic were already victims of war. They lived in a region torn apart by violence they didn't choose and couldn't escape. When Sister Marie Claire treated their children, bandaged their wounds, listened to their problems, she was offering something rare in that landscape, genuine care without judgment. Or so they believed. The betrayal wasn't just that she was a spy. It was that she turned their suffering into intelligence, their trust into tactical advantage, their desperate need for help into vulnerability. And what about the real Catholic mission still operating in Lebanon? What about the actual French nuns who had spent decades building relationships, earning trust, providing care with no ulterior motive? This operation didn't just risk the cover identity. It risked their safety too. Because once Hezbollah learned that Israel had used the cover of a nun, every nun became suspect. Every foreign aid worker became a potential intelligence asset. The protective barrier that religious and humanitarian workers had relied on was weakened, perhaps permanently. There's also the question of what this does to the concept of protected status in conflict zones. International humanitarian law recognizes certain people and places as protected: medical workers, religious figures, humanitarian organizations. These protections exist because wars, no matter how bitter, need some boundaries. Some spaces where human beings can receive help without it being part of the battlefield. When intelligence agencies exploit those protections, they erode the entire framework. They make it rational for militant groups to view everyone as a potential threat, and that makes the next conflict more brutal for everyone. Yet, intelligence professionals will point out that Hezbollah itself has repeatedly violated these same principles. The group has hidden weapons in civilian areas, used ambulances to transport fighters, operated from hospitals and schools. In that context, they argue, maintaining absolute ethical purity is a form of unilateral disarmament. It's choosing to lose. And when the enemy you face has shown no hesitation in using every available tactic, can you afford to restrict yourself? What this operation proved is that espionage, at its highest level, isn't about gadgets or action sequences. It's about human beings making impossible choices in the dark, knowing that no matter what they choose, someone will pay the price. Someone always pays. The question is never whether the cost exists. The question is whether you can justify who bears it, whether you can live with the decision when you're alone with your thoughts years later, whether the lives saved outweigh the trust destroyed, and whether creating a world where even nuns can't be trusted is a world worth winning.